All right, here we go, everyone. It is time to get started. It's an awesome Wednesday night. I know you guys will be thrilled for that one. You know, it's our annual International Food Hall evening. It's not just Daryl's birthday. It's actually we actually have the big food night, and Logan's Royal has tacos there. Everything is great, but everything else works too. Jorge will have some, I'm sure, Peruvian going, and just on and on it goes. And so it is a great evening. We'll have a Devo that night after the main meal. And so that starts next Wednesday night at 6. And then the week after that, we'll start a regularly scheduled Bible class on Wednesday nights, where, in here at least, where we are looking at Galatians, a study of Galatians. And so we'll be going through that book on Wednesday nights. And so tonight, we're at a slightly different place. You look up there on the screen, of course, it's God's School for Greatness, 1 Kings 17. And I thought, well, this is kind of an opportunity for us to look at one particular male in the Old Testament and maybe think through some of that, just how God seems to work and how he likes to work with individuals. And so that's where we'll go tonight. And so, again, you're more than welcome. Oh, thank you. Yes, good. And so more than welcome to join me here, 1 Kings chapter 17, here in just a moment. We'll be there. Okay. It's really bad. I am not following football like I used to, as I, of course, have repented from my old Texan ways. And I know. And of course, if you're in Colorado, you don't even know who to even follow, right? It's like yesterday you were a Southwest, you were down there with the rest of us with the rest of us football teams. And then you joined the Pac something, and now the Pac something's gone, right? And so you just think about all the transitions. School has started back, of course, and the kiddos have gone back and all of that's taken place. And you think about, how does God train us? How do we go to school? How does God shape us and mold us? And so I think to answer that question, partly we can look at some characters in the Bible, of course, and look at how God took them to school, so to speak. But I think we don't realize, like, where is our battle? We've talked about this many times. Where is our battle as Christians? Who do we fight? Who's the enemy? Remind me once again. Well, Satan's the enemy, and his power was death, but that was defeated on the cross. Ourselves, isn't it? I mean, really, that's exactly right. It's like the only battle that you and I face is the battle internally right here. Nobody else out there is our enemy. There's a bunch of wayward people, wayward sheep who need to hear the gospel. I am constantly surprised at the sheer amount of people who still follow any kind of moral laws that are not Christians. I would expect our culture and our world to just fall apart completely. But by the grace of God, right, stuff still hangs on. I'm just always amazed, because they're like lost sheep. They're without a shepherd. They don't know what they're doing. They're just, right? It's like, surprised it just doesn't go into chaos. Well, there's probably enough Christians holding it together, right? I mean, really, our prayers and what we do as Christians. And so our battle, though, the only enemy we face, and this is so true as men, it's in the shadows, away from everybody else. When nobody else is watching, nobody else is knowing what's going on, that I think we struggle the most in this battle. Whatever that struggle is, right? I mean, we can make a list, couldn't we, of struggles that men in the brotherhood churches are dealing with, right? You know, how are we doing on, are we better, are we having less divorce rate than what's out there? Well, we'd hope so, but, and so you're like, wow, where are we missing? What's going on there that's such a huge struggle? And so we think about selfishness or whatever the words are, right? You know, do we face a huge problem with internet, computer, everything instantly at our fingertips? Whatever it might be, from pornography to instant negativity to, you know, I talk about that lawyer that we knew in California that passed away, and he retired, and his favorite thing was to argue with people online. And so he spent every day just in these chat rooms arguing how Christianity was awesome and everything else was bad. And you're like, I just don't think that was very constructive for him or for anybody else in that little world he was in. And so, what else? I mean, does that make sense? I think in the private moments, you know, it's easy kind of in the arena or with everybody's around, and on a Sunday morning, everybody kind of looks normal, as much as we can look normal in the church and all coming together, and we don't realize, right, the struggle that's happening internally with so many of our young guys in particular, of course, as they face the future. No comments, or does that make sense? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
I would say this is a struggle that men have faced even from generations back.
Uh-huh.
It's something that men have faced. I think that we have this maybe in our minds that there was some of that, but man, as I've been in ministry for 30, 40 years now, it's something we men struggle with the whole time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I think we actually do. I think we struggle a lot with connection. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. I think that's spot on. I think that is, yeah. So, and having said that, this lesson is about the times that we're alone. And so, because I think that's where this kind of comes out of it, right? It's like God uses us and shapes us in his school, and then he expects us to venture out and go out and be with people. And so what we do in those kind of private moments really determines a lot about what happens when we go out there. And so we'll use, of course, 1 Kings 17 here, and so we might as well get into this. So let me pull this up. 1 Kings 17. There we go. We got Elijah. It's one of those great words, the Tishbite, who is of the inhabitants of Gilead. Think of this like Jesus. Like, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Gilead? Kind of thing here. And he said unto Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain for these years, but according to my word. And so we get this man called Elijah, and he lived an interesting life, right? It's like how God uses a lot of these, how he brings his heroes, right, up to speed, so to speak. It's like we could name them off, couldn't we? It's like, where was Abraham? Often right? Where was Moses? When he was with all the folks in Egypt, that was a no-go. He had to go out there by himself with some sheep for many years, 40 years, right? And on that goes. I think about the obscurity of Jesus in Nazareth. Just a few houses, nothing there, like not a prominent place of any shape, form, or fashion in Israel in the first century. And so you just think, okay, God really loves to do that. And so I've got a screen on it. It's like two things, obscurity and isolation. It's like God is using obscurity and isolation to train us. It's like, what are we doing in those time periods? And we really are faced with, that's the battle. And how we walk that battle and overcome those things in that time period is how well or how effective we're going to be when we are called upon in the arena of whatever it might be. So, where's the struggle? I think about, okay, our struggle to get more, what? I don't know. We just went through the deacons process again. We have a lot of deacons, and it's awesome. But there's always room for more. So how do we have more, deacons? And how do we go through that? And really, something as simple as thinking about deacons, right? It's not out here. It's what's happening somewhere else privately that makes such a big difference in our lives. And so lots of different ways we can talk about this. Like, what's another way to talk about it? The wilderness experience that maybe we all need to go through from time to time, where God has a chance to shape us. I'll throw one up there. This is just kind of a little bonus round. It's like from a book. It's called A Resilient Life. It was written 20 years ago now. Gordon MacDonald, one of those guys that wrote a lot of books. But in this book, he talks about a track coach that taught him a bunch of lessons. And I thought, hey, this is pretty fun because I don't run. And I should have asked Daryl. Daryl's probably read the book and could give us all these points and really talk it up. But as someone who only would run if I was being chased by something large and aggressive, then, it's like this guy, Gordon, he was talking about, he was a skinny little kid in high school, and he tried out for football, and the football coach was like, yeah, really, this would hurt you more than it would help us, so move along. But have you considered track? And he sent him off to the track coach, and the track coach took him and made him do all kinds of stuff. And he eventually won a state championship in one of the track and field events. And so he talks about how this coach would make him, do all this stuff every day, and that was involved in that. And then in his book, he's like, I had to run by myself. And it dawned on me that when I was the coach was trying to help me. It's like he put me in a school, and it's like I had to do this stuff all by myself. So every day I'd meet with the coach, and he would say, okay, I want you to go over there, and I want you to run so many whatever's laps, and then off he'd go. And I think about this, like when Daryl talks about running, and some of you guys talk about some of the guys in our church that are big runners, and you're out there by yourself, and it's like, oh, that's fun. That's the only part that's good. Now, believe it or not, I can be by myself in a chair with my cup of tea, and it works out too. But somehow maybe it gets lost in the translation of these lessons. But I'm just using this as a warm-up. It's like he wrote in his book, he's like, when I spent all this time alone, this is what I learned. He's like, I really was able to think about from my heart and my mind how God was at work, the possibilities of God being at work in my life. And you're like, wow, okay, that's pretty good. It's like, I get that. It's like I have the battle to face. When I'm by myself, am I thinking about God and his work or not? And so I hear that with this fellow when he wrote this book. He talks about he'd look back over the track, what he's already ran, and he'd try to think about what lesson is God trying to teach him. Obviously the self-discipline. He's like, when I ran, he's like, I would run alone, and it was easy to just stop. It was easy just to say, nobody will know. How easy that is to give in to that. And so he just appreciated this track coach for helping him learn this love of self-discipline. And of course, ultimately going back and figuring out that, wow, things really are nice when you have a group of people that can help you do things and be a part of a team. And so back to Elijah, though. What do we learn from Elijah? I mean, think about Elijah's life and how he did what he did. And, let's get back into 1 Kings. We'll kind of bounce around a little bit in this. But, Elijah has to do a bunch of stuff where he's called by God, and it's a very dark time in their history, right? 1 Kings 16:33. Ahab also made the Asherah. Thus Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel than all the kings of Israel who were before him. So it was a difficult time. Ahab, of course, isn't necessarily a really evil king. What is he? Remember Ahab. What made Ahab Ahab? Yeah. He let Jezebel rule, right? It's like, so while we're in here and it's just us, right? If you could boil it down to one, this is a thing that if you've not heard me talk about this before, this is the perfect class to do it in. Believe it or not, it's been studied a whole bunch right in the Brotherhood and also churches across the United States. But you know what the number one problem with men are in the age bracket of about 55 to 65? They don't get involved in anything. It's like no involvement. It's like a huge problem. And we actually worked with the church in California for a little while that didn't have, this church ended up being, what were they? About 180 members. They had not a single person attend worship in that age group at that time period, which has been several years ago. They had older people like crazy, And all these older people were bringing their grandkids, and you'd be like, where's the parents? And they'd be like, they kind of checked out. And so it was just a weird dynamic to see all these 20-somethings and 30-somethings in this church. And at the time, that was about the 40 to 50-year-old group that were just gone. And then all the 60s and 70s and 80-year-olds that were still vibrantly doing things in the church. Well, you can see how that ripple would run through churches. And we're hitting it in America it's around the 55 to 65-year-old age group. And who should those people be? The elders, the leaders. Like the people who are like, okay, we're going to mentor, here we go. And you're like, well, they're not around. And lo and behold, that kind of wisdom and oomph in a church is actually really more important than we think. Anyway, I'm just bringing that up to say that men check out, bad things happen, right? If we have that happen, we're okay, we've often said, right? If the men all check out, what will happen? The women will have church. They're the spiritual ones. They'll have church. They'll do their thing. There's more than one church in India that's all women. There's not a single man in the church. And Sheil went and spoke several times at a church of 300 women, not a single man. And very vibrant, dynamic group, and very spiritual, and lots of great things happening. But you know that, right? It's like women are always going to be like that. It's us men that have to be told, get going, get busy. And a part of that school that God uses is what he put Elijah through. And so I'd like for us just to think about that for a moment of how he worked on Elijah in these rough times. And so maybe we can do that. Like what do you think? Like Elijah is having to go through long periods of obscurity and loneliness, where he alone is doing his thing. And he's going to face some big time stuff, and he's going to have to do it by himself. And so, he goes to Ahab in the royal courts by himself. He'll watch a brook dry up by himself. He has to go to the widow, right, of Zarephath and ask for her last meal by himself. Dead child by himself, right? He's going to rebuke the king by himself. He's going to go do the whole thing with Baal and the priest by himself. The list goes on and on and on. And so I think about, what is God trying to do to Elijah? How does Elijah get to that place? There's just times when we are going to be alone, and what should we be doing? How do we deal with that? And that's the part where I think is the school for men. And maybe this doesn't resonate with you guys at all, but it does with me. I think about Elijah, and I think, okay, when I'm by myself, it is super easy to think about me. And maybe you guys don't have that problem of thinking about me, but I'm a pretty good guy. You should think more about me. No. It's like, you probably have the same problem, right? It's so easy to just lose that insight or outsight into others. So what do we do? What would be what's some of your secrets? I mean, you guys are here on a Wednesday night. You could be surfing or at home or surfing the internet. You could be like, doing all kinds of other choices. And here you are in a Bible class where we're talking about Elijah. So what's some of our secrets? Like, how are you weathering this very concept? Like, what has God had to do with you in the times of when you're by yourself?
imagine as a prayer time, and it becomes something that you take your mind off of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and focus it on God, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're going, wow, I just did another couple of miles,
Mm-hmm.
and my body was, yeah, it was hurting, but I was able
Mm-hmm.
to push through that, and that alone time, sometimes we can become our worst enemy during that
Mm-hmm.
alone time, and we get so inward focused, but you have to find ways to
Mm-hmm.
focus on God, whether it's through prayer or through scripture,
Mm-hmm.
or even hymns and songs that you can
Mm-hmm.
put it in your head that you
Mm-hmm.
allow that to fill your brain instead of your own selfishness that
Mm-hmm.
can destroy you.
Yeah, that's really good. Of course, culturally, what's in vogue right now is this, it's like mindfulness. We call it mindfulness. But really, Christians have been practicing it for 2,000 years, right? That's what we're called to do as Christians, is to be mindful of God and what he's doing. And so I find myself, and I'll just put number one up there, I think obscurity and loneliness teach us to be dependent upon God if we'll use it effectively, if we will transfer ourselves to that mindfulness of what God's doing. And so just last week, of course, we, because of the terrain, the mountains and all the stuff, right? We don't really get the Caribbean puffy clouds so much here, they're not like a thunderhead. It's just puffy white clouds going. And I caught myself multiple times looking out and thinking, wow, God, it's like, what is this saying about God? What is God trying to tell me? And it's so easy to be mindful in those moments if we allow ourselves to start asking, okay, what is God all about in this situation? And it's not like a secret thing, right? Or there's not like a particular route. It's like maybe one time it's, wow, God's big and I'm little. Okay, that's a great lesson for me to think about. Or maybe it's God's been doing these clouds and making rain and having it do his thing for thousands of years, and I'm just, I caught myself one time this last week while we were on this trip thinking, yeah, there we are. These clouds actually last longer than vapor. And we're just vapor, right? James says. You're just a vapor. It's like, that's not even the cloud. That's just like the smoke that comes from your tea kettle or your coffee thing that instantly and it's gone. And you're like, wow. See, that's being mindful of God. And it's being mindful of who I am too, right? So I think there's that, in those moments when we're mindful, that teaches us dependence. Anyone else? Ah. Hmm. 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 Wow, there's where Satan's doing his thing. Maybe it's not in the big attack. It's in I'm just going to give you so much noise, everything's drowned out. That's good. Yeah, that is good. I mean, it's bad, right? But it's exactly what's happening to us.
Having a wife with messed up ears, it's the noise that kills him.
I mean,
it becomes painful and distracting.
Yeah, and so you think, okay, what do we got to do? I have to be conscious of, okay, there is a lot of noise here, and I can't let that become my distraction, my thing, my focus, or I never enter into this mindfulness moment.
I think it's my experience anyway is I find myself and a lot of the men that I talk with are very, very disconnected with who they are. They don't have an internal life. We don't tend to examine
Mm-hmm.
our lives to avoid thinking
Mm.
about who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I in God's plan?
Mm-hmm.
Because those thoughts, I think, are really difficult
Mm-hmm.
for men. They,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
it comes. Our wives do it automatically.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
They're so good at it.
There's just so much
And
more spiritual
we
being
are
in that.
oblivious
Yes. Yes.
so often.
Yeah. So thinking back to our character tonight, it's like these forces that drive. It's like God's like, I'm going to drive you to a place where you have no choice. Like these guys it's like Moses being pushed out into a far-flung desert wilderness. It's hot, it's dry, there's no people. And he's been surrounded by the noise of the Egyptian empire. And God puts him in this place. I mean, how quiet is it in the middle of the heat of the day in some wilderness with some sheep? I mean, other than the sheep over there making noise, that's a pretty... And you think about Elijah and his being pushed. It's like his perception that he alone is left, and how bad that perception was, and how he didn't know himself or what's going on in God's world. He didn't know God, of course. And so God drives him with this perceived enemy of Jezebel and her crew. And then you're like, okay, we're in places like caves, and God, of course, does his thing in whispers, and we're forced to hear. And it's like, that's where he learns about himself and who God is. And he learns that, you're just a little bit of a big operation. So maybe you need to stop thinking the way you're thinking about yourself and about me, God's saying. Yes.
Thank you. We talk a lot about God's plan from the very beginning, and we see it unfolding in the scriptures, but He only picks out certain people to work His plan. And what about all the other millions of people that He never comes to and tells them anything specific that He wants to do? And I think that's kind of a difficult in a way. At least I've had those thoughts. At least God gave me a specific mission to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like Paul had a mission, and
Mm.
very serious about that. Elijah had a mission, Moses
Mm-hmm.
had a mission, and there's millions of people who, of course, we have the scriptures to tell us how we should live, but
Uh-huh.
we don't have a specific, like you go over to
Uh-huh.
another city and do this, and this.
Okay. So, it's 7:45. We'll skip to the main lesson. Here's the lesson tonight. Every single one of us are in the exact same school. And God is going to do exactly what he did with Elijah with every single one of us. If A, we let him, B, we hear his voice in that quiet time. It's not going to be written down in the Bible because he's already finished writing the Bible. But I promise the same thing will happen to every single person that will stop and go, wait a minute, God. That's the whole point of the lesson. It's like he has the exact same plans for all of us. We're the men of the kingdom today, right? I mean, we're it. We are the only plan he has. There's no plan B. He's not going to raise up an army. He's not going to, there is nothing else for the pagans that live around us in Boulder County. I mean, we're it. We're not even Nashville. When I was minister in Nashville, there was 123 other churches. I'm sure by now there's 130 because it's Nashville and they have a tendency to... Anyway, and so you think, we're not even Nashville. It's like, we're out here basically on the frontier. I mean, there's like Loveland up there and Fort Collins way up there, but we're like plan A, and there's no other plan. And so you think, how could that be? It's like in some ways, Elijah had an Elisha, and eventually God's got to tell him, oh, do you not know that there are all these thousands of people over here that worship me right here in your own little country? And it's like he's telling us, okay, yeah, I've whittled it down to the best 1,000 in northern Colorado. You guys can do it. And so I think we have to see in our obscurity and loneliness, I think we have to hear God saying, no, actually, I do have a plan for Linwood. Yeah, maybe he's not going to tell you, like, go to Jezebel. Yes. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Right. Exactly. That's a great place to jump into this. It's like the humility that's involved there. Like, when's the last time you thought of these guys? Elijah's not up there. I don't even know how to pronounce them, right? Who knows? Maybe Hermes, Petrobus, Hermes, Asyncritus. I'd like to be called Asyncritus. Hey, Asyncritus, how's it going? So right after Romans 12, at the end of the book, Romans 16, verse 14, these guys are mentioned as faithful servants of the church in Rome. And Paul's like, you guys are the guys. Like, you're the servants. You are doing it. You're like, okay, these guys are the Elijahs. And we don't know what they did or how they served or what went on in the Roman church. But I know their names because Paul actually wrote them down on a book that's been, their names have been, I mean, it's so strange. It's like those names have been copied in a book that's been printed billions and billions of times. Like, none of our names have been written in a book billions of times. Like, the Bible's been printed all over the place in hundreds of languages, and those guys' names are all in them. And you're like, yeah, so he's doing the exact same thing he did with Elijah with us. If we're transformed and we can hear God. And I think he's doing that. It's in these moments by ourselves. We've got to understand God's at work, and it's not about us. And I got to focus on God and be mindful of God and whatever things to help us do that. And then we get these guys. It's just, yeah, I was right tracking with you with Romans, because it's like Paul is trying to help us see, okay, there is a plan for us. And there's other Roman scripture, but we're out of time, so we're going to stop. Because I wanted to kind of put this in on this last little bit. Like he's got to prepare us, right? We have to go through this preparation time period, and I think that happens in this obscurity and loneliness time. It's when we're by ourselves that it matters. It's not, that's where this thing happens. So how well are you guys not listening to the noise and focusing on God and realizing he's at work in your life and the importance you play in the church work here? I mean, it's like all of us have been placed, sojourners, even you guys are here with us right now. It's like all of us have been placed at Longmont Church of Christ for a reason. This is it. It's like God has some mission for each and every one of us, whatever that is. And how well are we handling that and seeing that we are a vital part of that? It's the Naaman syndrome. The Naaman syndrome for men. Naaman is such a great example of that, right? 2 Kings 5. Remember what he says? He's like, what do you mean go dip at the Jordan? I got two rivers that are a lot cleaner coming from coming from the mountain. One's a nice mountain stream, crystal clear. I should go dip in my own rivers. They're a lot better than in this little piddly muddy river called the Jordan. You can't even, and he has to, of course, be brought to his senses by the servant. And so there's that constant choice. And this is where we'll stop. It's like if he chooses his own rivers, well, yeah, maybe it's nice, clean water, and he'll get some temporary relief, but he won't be healed. He's got to do it God's way. He can't do it his own way. It's more appealing to go to his rivers, but only the Jordan will actually do the trick, right? So in some ways, he's got this ongoing choice. The battle Naaman has to make is the battle that we as men, I think, really do face. I think Naaman is he's like the character that defines what men must go through. And don't you relate to it? It's like he's the general and everything's great and he's done all these great, magnificent battles, but he's got one flaw, leprosy. And so so it's like, is he going to go self or is he going to go spirit? Is he going to go his way or is he going to go God's way? Right? Is he going to cater to his own pride or is he going to go the humility way? And I think the secret there in that last line, right? His rivers are awesome rivers in the world's eyes. The Jordan is only awesome in God's eyes. So which one are we going to be? That's the choice I think all of us make as men. And I think all of us yearn. In Linwood, I think you're right. I think we yearn for, I want to be like Elijah. I mean, I want to make a difference in people's lives. Like, I want to serve God. And so, but what's the answer to that? Well, I think it starts in some of these quiet times on our own when we've got to be mindful of what God's doing. And can we do that as a church? Can churches do that? Like, can a church decide, there's not really anything happening. God's not really at work. And when they decide that, God's not really at work. Right? That's the point. It's like, yeah, God can't do his thing. He can't use them the way he wants. And we all have that opportunity to be a place where God's at work